Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Supply Chain Part 2, Reshoring and Using Total Cost to Buy and Sell Smarter event as a part of the Manufacturing Reimagined webinar series. My name is Tyler Roach, and I will be going over some technical tips and tricks that will be helpful while using Remo. First of all, welcome to Remo, our virtual event platform. You may have noticed Remo is very different from other online platforms. When you enter the event, you will be dropped into an open seat at one of the tables. To move tables, simply double-click on the table you would like to join. When switching tables, your camera and microphone may take a second to reconnect. Use your mouse to zoom in and out and also navigate the floor plan. You can also click on different avatar bubbles to see a person's name, contact information, and even send them a direct message. You'll also notice you have a toolbar along the bottom of your screen. You can use this to send messages to the general chat that everyone can see, or to just the table chat that your table can see. Once the speakers enter presentation mode, if you'd like to enlarge the presentation slides, do so by clicking the 4 arrows in the top right corner of the picture you'd like to enlarge. To be able to see all of the presenters again, simply press the escape button on your computer. If you begin to experience some sort of technical issue, use the chat feature to express the problems you are having, and one of our technical gurus will come over and help you out. I hope everybody enjoys today's conference. And at this time, I'd like to invite to the stage Eric Fasser, FuseHub's Design and Engineering Solutions Specialist.
All right, thank you, Tyler. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Eric Fasser with FuseHub, and I'm proud to bring you the next event in our Manufacturing Reimagined series. This event is part 2 of our supply chain focus called Reshoring Using Total Cost to Buy and Sell Smarter. For those of you that tuned in Tuesday to part 1, you know that this program is sponsored by the New York Manufacturing Extension Partnership, or MEP. For everyone else, I just want to quickly mention that the COVID initiative and our mission, which is to support small and medium-sized manufacturers, and specifically in this case, is to help these types of companies with COVID recovery efforts. This initiative is supported by 4 key programs. The first is this Manufacturing Reimagined program, and it's a series of webinars and virtual workshops that help manufacturers address COVID-related challenges, plus an opportunity to have one-on-one discussions with our solution experts and get guidance on various resources that they need and find out about potential project funding as well. The other 3 programs include a PPE purchasing assistance program, virtual assessments that help companies optimize their operations, and then the 4th one is a Reshoring and Rebuilding Supply Chain initiative that's being led by the Center for Economic Growth, or CEG, and that's what we're going to focus on today, which leads me to my guest. Michael Lobstinger is the Senior VP for CEG's Business Growth Services and the Regional Center Director for the Capital Region MEP. Michael directs his team in providing support to manufacturing and technology companies in growth, operations, sustainability, and business acceleration. And today he's going to share valuable information with us about the Reshoring and Supply Chain initiative that he's leading. And we're very honored today to have Harry Mosier with us. Harry is the president of the Reshoring Initiative, which he founded in 2010 with the mission of bringing 5 million manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. Harry received his bachelor's and master's degrees in engineering from MIT, as well as an MBA from the University of Chicago, and was president of a high-end machine tool maker for over 20 years. I'm going to read some accolades. He's a recipient of numerous awards, including Industry Week's Manufacturing Hall of Fame, and Quality Magazine's Quality Professional of the Year. He's participated in presidential forums at the White House. He was a member of the Department of Commerce's Investment Advisory Council, and he's frequently quoted in national news and media outlets. So for today's agenda, Michael's going to start us off by explaining what the Reshoring and Supply Chain Initiative is and what assistance they can provide to manufacturers. Then Harry's going to talk about the shifting environment with regard to reshoring and how manufacturers can use a tool called total cost of ownership to justify reshoring and purchasing decisions, and also how it helps manufacturers make reshoring a viable solution to others. Finally, rather than a traditional Q&A session at the end, we're going to end the presentation and go back to the networking platform where you can sit down and virtually meet with the speakers and ask some questions directly. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike Lobstinger with Center for Economic Growth.
Thank you, Eric. It's a great introduction. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar today. This is a little bit of repeat from on Tuesday. As if some of you joined Tuesday, I'm going to share some of the same message. My name is Michael Lobstinger. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Center for Economic Growth, which is the Regional Economic Development Organization and Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center in the Capital Region. And before we get started with Harry from the Reshoring Initiative today, I just want to give you an update on the NYMEP Reshoring and Supply Chain Program that we were awarded. The National Institute of Technology and Standards, NIST, through the Federal CARES program, was included $50 million to support small and medium-sized manufacturers impacted by COVID-19. Of those funds, New York State was awarded a portion of that to support the various programs that Eric had talked about. In particular, the reshoring and supply chain of this received $800,000, which we are putting towards this effort. And it will include $400,000 set aside for very specific assessments and projects with companies. Some other funds are going into some other initiatives to better understand the broader impact so we can formalize more and other programs in the future. In this current phase that we're in right now, we are reaching out to manufacturers across the state to get feedback and understand the impacts and or actions that they've been taking on their supply chain or reshoring or overall business impact due to COVID. That link is actually on this slide, going to newyorkmep.org and EAP-reshoring. I really urge manufacturers or our state partners to visit the below link. Share this with manufacturers and get them to fill it out. There's the data we're going to collect is not only going to qualify potential customer or manufacturers for assessments and projects, but we want to aggregate that data, tell a bigger story, and also push for federal assistance and more state assistance going forward. So it's really important that we gather as much data as possible and we start having conversations with our manufacturers who have been impacted. In order for a company to actually qualify for an assessment or a project, they do need to fill out the online survey. And with that, we're ultimately going to be doing free assessments, and project support will be up to about $10,000 for a project. And also, many of the MEPs in the state have access to other funds and other programs that could be potentially combined with those efforts. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Harry. And, Harry actually has been doing this for many, many years. And he is one of our resources that we are going to be using for our assessments. And one of the tools that he'll probably talk about here is obviously the total cost of ownership assessment, but also maybe he might talk a little bit about the import substitution program. So with that, Harry, I'll turn it over to you. Great to have you today.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be here. I've got to do a little bit of clicking here to get things going. Application window. Just a second. It didn't work so far.
Is it not pulling up my screen, Harry?
Yeah, can you see it now?
No, we're seeing like a file folder window open.
Yeah, I've got this up.
Maybe close out of that and unshare and then reshare and then
Okay, I'll try it. Yeah.
should let you select the
There we go. Sorry
alternate screen.
if I hit the wrong thing here. So share screen. Application window. Here we go. Now we got it. How's that?
It's we're not seeing it yet. Oh, hold on. It's maybe just taking a second here.
Still not seeing?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be loading for some reason. Tell you what, why don't I can pull the slides up on my end and you can just walk through that way.
Okay, we can do that. That's better than not seeing them.
Yeah, just give me a second.
So while you tell me when, I'll see it when you've got it up. I'm going to stop sharing so you can take control.
Okay.
There you go. This reminds me, once I was actually in Connecticut, and I gave a presentation, and the governor was also on the program, and he was the noted speaker and I was the keynote speaker. I'm not sure how he felt about that, but I got up and I started to talk, and I said, and I turned and there's no slides, and I talked some more and I turned and there's no slides, and I looked over at the audio-visual table and they said they didn't have the file. Somebody hadn't sent it to them. So I had to do the whole thing without the slides, and the governor kept giving me the thumbs up and said, hey, and I think I did better without them. And I had everybody's attention because they were sharing my agony for not having the slides.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I believe we got them up now. Can you see them as well?
Let's see if I'm gonna click on it and see if that does it. It's not a big. I don't know how to get it full screen so I can read it.
Click the 4 little arrows in the corner, upper
Okay,
corner.
good. Okay, I got it now.
All right. So I'm going to mute myself and you just tell me next slide when you want me to advance.
Okay, that's great. So sorry everybody for all that fumbling, but basically we're talking about reshoring, which is bringing manufacturing back from offshore, and using total cost, specifically the total cost of ownership estimator, to help the buyers, generally at the bigger companies, to buy smarter, and the sellers, probably most of you, the supply chain, to sell smarter, to help convince those bigger companies to buy from you instead of offshore. Next. So a little background on me. I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is across the river from New York City. And the biggest thing in town was Singer sewing machine. Back in maybe 1910, the Singer factory was the largest factory in the world. They had 2.6 million square feet, about 5,000 workers. Again, that would be big today, huge today. It was the biggest in the world in its day. And my grandfather was a foreman there. My dad ran about a third of the factory. I worked there summers in high school and college. And I went past 20 years ago and it was all gone. There's nothing of Singer made there. As far as I can tell, nothing of Singer made anywhere in the United States, everything imported. And I thought about that, the legacy of the family and the city, the state, and the other companies, the companies that as I sold machine tools and foundry equipment to during my career, companies and industries that had gone out of business, entire sectors of the U.S. economy that had disappeared, largely because of imports. And I cried then for what had been lost by the country, by the state, and decided something had to be done to bring that manufacturing back. Next. So if you take a perspective on this, U.S. manufacturing at best is plateauing. I think if you measured by pounds and size of stuff, we're making a lot less than we did 20 years ago. This is measured in value. Next. And as a result, manufacturing share of GDP is down about 50% from maybe 27% after the war, which is obviously exaggerated a bit, but down from there to about 12%. So a dramatic decline. Next. But it isn't because we're not consuming goods. You hear about we're a service economy. Yeah? Well, our share of goods has held up very well. The personal consumption of goods has grown about 2.5% per year, which is faster than the GDP. So our consumption of goods is holding up very well. Next, the problem is just that we're not producing as much of them as we used to. So this is a chart showing the trade balance. And after the Second World War, we had a dramatic surplus, and that declined to about break even around 1979, and then has come down since, such that we're now for the last 2 or 3 years averaging about $800 billion trade deficit. That means our imports exceed our exports by about $800 billion a year. And at current levels of US productivity, that amounts to about 5 million manufacturing jobs. That's why my goal is to bring back 5 million manufacturing jobs to balance the trade deficit, not to have a surplus like Germany or Japan, but just to be balanced. Next. And tied in with this, the manufacturing jobs as a percentage of US employment have come down from about 27% to about 9%, so cut by about 2/3. And that's primarily because of the trade deficit. Next. So as you can see here, the two are tightly correlated. The blue is the manufacturing employment, the red is the trade. Some of the articles you'll see will ascribe the decline in manufacturing employment primarily to automation, productivity, but it's not true. And specifically in the last 12 years, U.S. manufacturing productivity has averaged an annual growth of about 0.4%. So we're not losing a lot to productivity. We've lost it primarily to offshoring. Next. And so why did that happen? Why did we lose so much? Primarily, the U.S. is not price competitive. So we, along with Plant Moran, one of the leading auditing and consulting companies, did a survey of manufacturers. We asked them, why do you offshore? Why don't you buy the stuff here? Why do you get it from offshore? And they said, you can see the big bar, primarily directly because of price. And then secondarily, other factors which were often due to price. For example, it's not available here. Well, why is it you can't get that item here in the US and you used to 20, 30 years ago? Because that sector of the US was driven out of business by the lower priced imports. So if you put it all together, I think it's clear that at least 70% of the decision is based on price. There's the occasional quality or occasional, they just never did make it here issue, but prices is the overwhelming issue. Next. And so why are we not price competitive? Well, from a macro viewpoint, the dollar has appreciated about 300% in the last 40 years against our major trading partners. And as a result, our costs, our wages are embedded in our manufacturing cost system are higher than they would have otherwise been. China joining the World Trade Organization opened the world up to Chinese competition, very aggressive, often not playing by the rules, but overall very aggressive, very hardworking competition. The consumers have accelerated the trend by insisting on the lowest price that they could find, and companies went out and found that lowest price. And also the consumers told their kids, don't go into manufacturing. That's not a good career anymore. It's all going away. And go to university. And most of them studied liberal arts and not the engineering that we needed. And few of them went into apprentice programs and the kind of training that you need to be competitive enough to reduce the price despite our relatively high wages. Companies have a lot of blame in this. The U.S. management is probably for in the entire world the most short-sighted. Everybody's worried about this month, this quarter's profitability, and as a result, we don't invest. The U.S. has about a third as many robots per 1,000 manufacturing workers as does South Korea. We invest about a third as much in CNC machine tools per year as does China. We just have not done the investments like relative to Germany. Our average CNC machine tool is about 3 or 4 years older. So especially relative to those low wage countries, we should be the one that's investing in automation because of higher wages. We should be able to get the ROI, but we haven't done the investment. In the lower right-hand corner, TCO, total cost of ownership, companies have not utilized that methodology. They've looked only or primarily at the X works price or the FOB price and not at the total cost. And therefore, significantly, they've imported things that they should be sourcing or producing here. Next. But fortunately, balance, inevitably gets restored a bit. So we talk about reshoring or onshoring. Two words mean essentially the same thing. Producing once again in the U.S. products that for a while were being imported, but that will be eventually sold or assembled here. FDI, foreign direct investment. So that's when a foreign company follows the same logic and decides to produce in the U.S. Localization, same idea, producing near the consumer. We also hear a lot about nearshoring. So that typically means bringing back from Asia the production of a product and producing it in Mexico or Canada for consumption largely in the U.S. And my strong preference is to bring the work to the U.S., but there is some category of parts that is so labor intensive, no matter how much you automate it, that you cannot economically get it into the U.S. And I'd rather have it in Mexico, for example, than in China, because product coming out of Mexico has about 40% U.S. content, and product coming out of China has about 5% U.S. content. So again, first choice U.S., but if I can't, then Mexico and Canada are excellent choices. Next. So other reasons work's coming back. The wages have gone up dramatically in China. So this chart shows indexed unit labor costs expressed in US dollars. And what was done, whatever that cost was, and it could have been wildly different in the different countries, call it 100 in each case back in the year 2000, and then each year adjust for the change in average wage rate, change in productivity, and change in the currency relative to the dollar. So you get a vision not of the actual costs in each, but the change in costs. Most of the countries moved around based on currency, but China was up 400%, it went from 100 up to 500. So this happened because the Chinese had the one-child policy, and the current workforce is about half the size it would have otherwise been, and actually declining by millions per year while ours is growing. And so the Chinese, with demand rising rapidly and supply falling, the price of labor went up dramatically, which is great for them. But finally, it's also great for us because it makes us start to become once again competitive. And because of this happening, because of their costs going up, even before the trade war, even before the coronavirus, Chinese work was coming out of China, moving significantly to Asia, India, Mexico, but maybe 15% of it coming to the U.S. And my mission, my reason for talking to you is to show you how you can work to get that percentage up from 15 to maybe 25%, and you specifically get more of it. Next. So some other reasons that are influencing this, upper left-hand corner, e-commerce. The Walmart expects to get things to you the next day. If there's a surge in demand, like we saw during the crisis, and they stock out, it's really tough to replenish them from Europe in a day. Whereas if your factory is 30 miles away, it's feasible to restock them within a day or a couple of days. Automation obviously helps to balance off the effect of higher wage rate. The Trump tariffs, love them or hate them, made Chinese products more expensive. There's a significant trend towards people preferring made in USA. The fellow you see there in the lower corner is Jim Womack. He's a neighbor of mine up here in Maine. And he talks about lean shoring. He says when you bring the work back, don't put it in the same factory with the same equipment, the same methods that you had when you lost it 20 years ago, but bring it back lean, bring it back more automated, better skill, lean shore. Next. So because of all these, there's been a nice positive trend. In 2010, when we were founded, in that year, 6,000 jobs were announced coming back. And by 2017, in the year, that annual rate was about 190,000, so dramatically up. And then it fell off a bit in 2018 and 2019. 2017 was a peak because of the reductions in corporate taxes and regulations. That was very attractive for companies. And then the trade war created business uncertainty, and companies said, hell, let's wait and see what happens and see how this all settles out. Next. So, and then we got the COVID crisis, and this has been obviously a disaster or a tragedy, but specifically on TV every night, people saw the shortages of gloves and masks and gowns. They heard about pharmaceuticals, the penicillin, et cetera, being 95% sourced offshore. And everybody, our whole society realized this is not a sustainable condition. The leading country in the world can't live like this. It's not acceptable. Next. And they realized that other products, people increasingly realize that other products have the same condition. We read now a lot about rare earth minerals, about 5G, about various kinds of discrete electronic devices, small capacitors, and so on. Cell phones, essentially all coming from outside, mainly from China. Apparel and footwear, 97% of what we consume is sourced offshore. That's not survivable in the long term. The Defense Department every couple of years puts out a study that describes the products that they cannot find here in the U.S. and where the U.S. is dependent on other countries, often our allies, but sometimes not our allies, to produce the weapons that are necessary to defend us. So again, not a smart condition. Next. So as a result of all this, ThomasNet, most of you know ThomasNet, used to be Thomas Register when I was young, and they've done survey after survey after survey and find that the percentage of companies planning to or actually bringing work back to the United States has grown significantly. It's actually a real trend actually happening, and they've surveyed consumers and found the consumer prefers not to buy something from China but rather to buy something from the U.S. Next. There's definitely some underlying tide that's helping. Companies, because of all this, have said having supply chains scattered throughout the world is no longer the best solution. They've recognized the Chinese COVID crisis, started in China, the Japanese tsunami, the Thai floods, the Icelandic volcano, which stopped air flights coming in 5 or 10 years ago, our own LA dock strike. Any one of these things can take a whole batch of suppliers that are at that distance away and make them no longer, that doesn't work. The supply chain breaks. Next. And so companies decided instead, or are deciding instead, that it makes more sense to put their factory in one location, imagine that in upstate New York somewhere, and to cluster their suppliers closer to that factory. Ideal is to put them right around the factory. Something like Toyota does, it brings in its assembly plant, brings in the suppliers right around it, but acceptably within the US or within North America. But if you have a factory and everything clustered around it, there's one risk of something happening to that supply chain. If there's a pandemic in that town, well, the suppliers are going to be down, but so is the assembly plant going to be down. So you've got one risk to deal with. Whereas when you have 100 supply chains scattered across the world to pick up pennies on cost, you have 100 chances of things happening and going wrong. Next. So Tco Estimator, I talked about it at the beginning. I think Eric and Michael both mentioned it. And it's online, it's free. You sign up, you sign in, you use it. Again, no charge. You can ask for help if you need it, but we've got a webinar to train you on it, everything you need to get going on it. And this is an example of that. The red circle is the Chinese price of 70, the blue triangle, a US price of 100. And so the procurement person, supply chain looks at that and says, that's 30% difference. I'm going to buy 12,000 of those a year. That's $360,000 per year of purchase price variance. That's how I'm measured. That's a third of my objective. I'm going to get my bonus. I'll probably get promoted. Of course, we'll send this new product off to China. But then they did TCO and looked at it and saw that the Chinese TCO was 98, US was 108. Now there's only 10% difference. And if the Chinese wages continue to grow as they have, within a couple of years, the Chinese total cost was going to be higher than the US. So now hopefully the company will say, I don't think I should send the new product off because there's a transitional cost of moving it off and bringing it back. And I should start planning to bring back much of what's now offshore and either expanding and hiring, training, or finding local suppliers to produce the product for me. Next. So to show you the power of using this, I took the first 180 cases of China versus the US, where company people had gone in, done the study, said they were doing a real study, not just playing around. And the blue line shows Chinese price as a percentage of US price. So it's a histogram, sort of normal shape. And so everything above 100, the vertical 100 line, everything above 100, the Chinese price is higher than US because the ratio to the US price is more than 100. And you can see that about 8% of the cases, when measured by price, the US has the competitive advantage. Whereas when you shift over to total cost, the US has the advantage 32% of the time. And if there happened to be a 15% Trump tariff, then 45% of the time, 46%. And if the MEP came in and helped you cut your costs by 10%, then probably it's 55% or 60% or something like that. So the point is that a significant percentage of what's offshore is reshorable profitably, or even at superior profitability, if the company does the math correctly. Next. So what is this total cost? How do you define it? Well, you start with FOB price, and here's total cost up here at the top. And the difference is what we call the hidden costs. And the hidden costs have what I call hard elements or factors such as freight, such as normal duty, travel to go see the supplier, packaging, the ability to do just in time when you're local as opposed to a container once a month. And then there's risks and strategic effects. Emergency air freight, rarely planned on, but often happening. The value of having engineering and manufacturing in the same community, able to talk in the same time zone to optimize the product and the process. The value of a made USA label, the risk of stocking out, not just losing your order, maybe losing the customer, the higher risk of cyber security, quality differentials. Next. So a lot of groups have studied this to find out what how big those hidden costs are, and typically it comes out somewhere in the 15 to 25% range, which is what we find statistically from the people that have used the Tco Estimator. Next. So some examples. I'm just going to leave these up for a second or two each. Some New York companies that either, in this case, they did a combination of reshoring and kept from offshoring. Like they thought about moving it offshore, and for various reasons, they decided not to. Next. Now, one of my favorite cases in the country is Sheryl Manufacturing, which produces Liberty tabletop software. Good friends there, Greg and Matt. They had, Greg at least, had maybe both had worked for Oneida. Oneida shut down. They bought the factory. They brought it back to life. For a while, the work went to Mexico. During the recession, they brought it back and got going again in New York. So clearly, reshored, only domestic flatware manufacturer, and they're doing very well, especially since the COVID crisis. More people want to buy U.S. and they've been booming. It's just a great story of what they've done. Next. Xerox, classic upstate New York company, brought work back from China. Next. And then foreign direct investment. I mentioned this is very important, and it's an essential part of the growth of U.S. manufacturing. Foreign companies, in many ways, seem to understand the value of being in the U.S. more than some U.S. OEMs do. Next. Armada. I've been to their factory. Strong group up there in Batavia. Next. So this is my favorite case of all. Mori Corp. They're an EMS company. They produce printed circuit boards and related electronic systems. And two things. First, they had a problem with a housing. They were forced to reshore it because of quality. And when they did that, they found that they cut their inventory by 90% or 94%, just by reshoring. No other act. Can you imagine making your OEMs, your customers, happy by cutting their inventory in half? And then second, about 5 years ago, they came to me and said, Harry, we're about to lose a huge order. So Tony, the VP sales, and I did the Tco Estimator. He took it to the customer, showed the customer that even though Mori's price was higher, the total cost to the customer would be lower. And the customer ordered, and Tony then ascribed that $60 million order to using the Tco Estimator. So I know it works. I know that in some cases you can do that. Not always getting a $60 million order, but there's definitely orders out there you can get. Next. So if you're in your company and your company has been importing and you're thinking of applying this, or if you're trying to convince a customer company to do this, probably one of the first places to start is to look for pain. Where are we losing orders because of delivery? Where do we have emergency air freight? Where's there warranty issues? Travel over to see the supplier. Late night telephone calls, people getting up at midnight to talk to people on their time zone. Trump Chinese tariffs, that could be 25%, could make all the difference in the world in terms of the economics of where to produce it. Next. Most of you know Deming, and the guru of quality, and he said, stop buying on the basis of price, instead minimize total cost. It sounds like something from Charlton Heston on the tablet, but it seems so intuitively obvious, but many companies follow his overall methodology and ignore this key principle. Next. Some of you probably use or know the TPS, Toyota Production System. I suspect the MEPs sometimes use that in their lean efforts. And here I've listed in the left each of the muda, the waste that Toyota identifies, and the idea of TPS is to minimize those, get rid of the waste, and only bring customer value. And in the right, I've shown how each of those wastes is made worse by offshoring and is reduced by reshoring. Next. No, I showed you that already, so just go ahead. It's worth seeing because it's such a good story. Next. So what can you do to bring the work back? You can think of what the reasons are that the company's brought work back already. And so this is a numeric list ranked of the negative things, the things that went wrong that caused companies to reshore. And I highlighted in red the ones that you can influence in terms of your quality, helping them see the advantage of better quality here, help them cut their inventory. I think it's very reasonable to expect the OEM to cut its inventory by 50% by sourcing from you. You can obviously reduce risk, intellectual property risk, communications. If a company is sourcing from China, it's pretty tough during the day to communicate, whereas they source from you and you get back to them immediately. well, then they're going to say, well, that's a lot better than waiting till tomorrow with China. Green considerations. We've done studies and shown 25 to 50% reduction in carbon footprint by sourcing in the US instead of sourcing in China. Next. And I mentioned China repeatedly because that's where half the reshoring has come from. There's a problem with silos in every organization, certainly, but especially in big companies and especially in procurement or supply chain. Often, salesmen have gone in and procurement says, I don't care about warranty, I don't care about inventory, I don't care about travel. My job is to reduce the price. And so if that happens, you have to go around them, go to manufacturing, go to engineering, go to marketing and sales, go to quality, and get them to support you and either convince procurement or to convince management, senior management, to tell procurement to consider the needs of all the company instead of just getting a bonus by cutting the price. Next. So here's what some suppliers, some typically contract manufacturers have done. On their website, they promote reshoring. They talk about the values of reshoring, the benefits of reshoring, and how they specifically can bring you some of the values that I showed you in that previous slide. Next. So Rodon Group is a Philadelphia-based injection molder, and for 10 years now, they've been aggressively promoting how they can help companies reshore. So some of these companies will put our website on to, in effect, let us do part of the arguing. Next. Ace Clearwater is a California-based fabricator for defense and aerospace components. And again, right on their website, talking about reshoring. Next. We're in or have gone through a recession, and recessions are painful. One thing you can do is sell what I call recession risk mitigation. And what I've done here in this chart or table is compared how long it takes the balance sheet to stabilize if the company is sourcing from Asia versus locally, and maybe 6 months from Asia and 6 weeks from local. So if they're having problems with cash, if their banks are leaning on them, much better to be sourcing from you. So they're much more stable, much less subject to volatility, and both on the way down, you protect them in effect by having a short supply chain, and on the way back up, when they need product to get going again and things are starting to boom again, you're there and you can deliver quickly. Next. So what Michael, I think, was referring to was the import substitution program, which is where we substitute domestic production for imports, or we help that happen. And so the way this works, you identify a product, something that you're really good at making, not just, yeah, I could make those if I had to, but something you're really good at making. And then we tell you who the biggest importers are of those products in New York, in the Middle Atlantic region, in the country, whatever you want. We tell you who those big importers are, the company name, address, how many tons they're bringing in, roughly the dollar value, whom they're buying them from offshore. And then we and the MEP train you on the use of the total cost of ownership. And then you make a pitch to you contact those companies and you convince them, do your best to convince them that they will be more profitable buying from you instead of continuing to import. Next. So just to imagine, you get a feeling for this. Many of those those importers you might not even know, but let's say you knew them and you were calling on them without the import substitution program, and you come in and say, Bill, do you need any widgets? And Bill says, no, it was a little rough for a while with China, but now it's okay. If I get in trouble, I'll call you. Okay. Now instead, with import substitution, you come in and say, Bill, I see you're buying 50 tons of widgets a year from offshore, largely from China, and we've got a new machine in that's really good at making those widgets. We're selling them to 3 or 4 companies, doing very well. We're so automated now that our labor cost is only 10-15% of our total cost. It can't be, our FOB price can't be that much higher than your FOB price from offshore. And we've done the TCO calculation, and there's 15, 20 points there. And there's Trump tariffs of 25%, we think you're going to be 20 points better off buying from us than continuing to buy offshore. So let's get together and work this out for the good of your company, our company, the state, the country, your risk mitigation. Next. So another way of looking at this, if say you're in some region in New York, and there's a couple of you competing over what I call the same old bones. The work mostly work stable, but sometimes the job goes back and forth between your competitors. But you're ignoring what I call the stake. There's more product imported than there is now produced in the U.S. So if you're only looking at the work that sort of bounces around within the market, and you don't look at what's being brought in from offshore, you're missing half maybe of the opportunities that you should have. Next. So this, with the MEPs, we have this type of program underway in the 5 states I show there, and we've got other states that are close to participating. So I think I'm sure it'll be a great project in New York. Next. Something else to think about, we have a National Metalworking Reshoring Award. We put it on with AMT, the group that normally puts on IMTS in September, and NTMA and PMA, all excellent organizations. And if you reshore something made out of metal, and you do it as an OEM or you do it as a supplier for somebody else, you can compete to win in that. This Sheryl Manufacturing was the winner last year. Next. So we're a nonprofit. We've got 24 sponsors. You see them there. We're honored to have all of them supporting us. The company I used to be president of was GF Machining Solutions, which used to be called Charmy and then Agi Charmy. I used to come up in New York State and help sell machines there fairly often. It used to be a great time. And so all the companies you see there, organizations, trade associations, et cetera, we're honored by and very much appreciate their support. Next. So this is the last slide. You've got our contact information there. I think it's also going to be made available to you on the FuseHub website. But this is, we think of ourselves a bit as in this vein. That's the little Dutch boy, and the dike is keeping the North Sea out of Holland. And the little Dutch boy sees the little leak and the stones are starting to shake a little bit. And so he says, wow, I could run and get the village elders, but I think the dike's going to collapse before then. He said, no, I'm going to stick my finger in the hole and stand there and hope they find me and repair the wall. And so this is, in effect, the water there is offshoring. And the little guy is maybe Harry when Harry had hair. And if you're the village elders, and if you say, Harry, nice presentation, keep it up, good luck, well, then things aren't going to get a lot better. But if you take the message back and use it in your own company for reevaluating offshoring and use it to help convince your customers to reevaluate, then things will be better for New York, will be better for you, your company, your children and grandchildren. That's why I'm doing this. So I'm here to help you, to work with Eric and Mike and the team, and look forward to great success with New York State. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Harry. That was great stuff. I'm going to pull up, go back to my other presentation here. Bear with me a second. Just got a closing slide just to get some information there for everyone. All right. So there we go. So once again, thanks, Harry. Great information. As I mentioned at the beginning of the event, once we're in this presentation mode, we're going to have a chance for everyone to kind of meet virtually. You'll be able to sit down with the speakers, ask any questions, or kind of network with each other. We're going to keep that open till 12:30. One other thing to note is that, again, when this presentation ends and the screen goes back to the floor plan layout, there's going to be a section at the bottom of the screen. Tyler mentioned this early on, but there's a section at the bottom of the screen called the event sponsors area. It's going to have various links to some of the programs and fundings that we've mentioned. There's going to be a link for a resource report, which is part of our program. That is kind of the pathway to funding through the Manufacturing Reimagined program. It's going to be a link to the survey Michael mentioned for CEG initiative. And then there's various link that Harry mentioned also. For the Reshoring Institute, you can go check out his website. We're all about the great program.
Michael, typo, Reshoring Initiative.
Initiative. Yep.
Okay, somebody will correct that.
Yeah, we'll correct that.
Thank you.
You'll be able to check out the import substitution program, the total cost of ownership estimator. So all those will be down at that bottom link at the bottom. Definitely check them out. And if you haven't already, look at the New York MEP website for some upcoming events. November 12th, we're highlighting the food and beverage industry. So if you're in that space, that's definitely worth looking at too. So with that, I want to say one last thank you to our speakers, Michael and Harry. Thank you to everyone for attending, and I hope you'll stick around for some additional networking. Take care.